Welcome to another episode of No Reserve, Hagerty's podcast about the enthusiast car market. Now, we're here to help you make sense of the car market, whether you're buying, selling, or just watching. Now, this week, it's all about the Monterey Classic car auctions that are happening next week. Our highlights include a gorgeous racing Ferrari from the 60s, a twin-engine Citroen, and the Porsche 918 supercar. I'm Larry Webster, editor of Hagerty Media, and I'm joined by Dave Kinney, the publisher of the Hagerty Price Guide. Between the two of us, we've got decades of experience buying, selling, and driving the cars we love. Plus, we don't just guess at the values. We're backed by the data of the Hagerty valuation tools. Okay, let's get into it. Dave, we are recording this on Wednesday, August 9th. This is a week before the big show, the biggest auction of the year in the United States at Monterey, California. So, but before we talk about that, and I know we're going to devote most of the episode to this, there was a car that sold recently that I think you own, and I want to hear your perspective on it. Please tell the audience what it is.
The car that sold on Bring a Trailer was a 13,000-mile Ferrari 2005 612 Scout Yeti. Now, keep in mind that's a front-engine V12 car. It does have 4 seats. Most of them are F1 or automatic transmission. Some of them are 6-speed. This happens to be an F1. It sold quite cheap
Really
in my
cheap.
estimation.
Yeah.
$79,500.
I mean, you own one of these cars, right?
I do. I own a 2005 as well. Mine has more miles on it. I think mine is worth more. Now, we're going to comment on...
Of course you do.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. Thanks. This car does not have its services up to date, and I think that really killed it on here. I think that the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in services might have brought $20,000 more on the sales side. There were only 32 comments on this car. Okay, now think about that. Bring a Trailer and only 32 comments. That's unheard of, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience with these cars because back in the day, I was a car and driver. I looked it up. I actually got to drive one in Italy, and we also did a comparison test because this car appeared at really the height of the sports coupe when you had the Aston Martin DB9. This was the Bentley Continental and the Mercedes CL600, all these big engine, big coupes. It was super impressive. And we did this comparison test there in Italy, and it was not even close. The Ferrari was the winner. I mean, it was an amazing car all around.
Yeah, and I know that some people don't like the styling and all that sort of stuff. I love the styling of the car. I mean, that's why I bought one. But this car's black with tan. I mean, you can't fault it for the color. So I just think this one got out cheap, and every once in a while they do. And this happened on Bring a Trailer, where supposedly everything brings the best money. But
is this a comment on the service terrifying? It has a 533 horsepower V12 engine, so that alone is worth something insane. But is the scare what it's going to take to keep this thing on the road? Is that what keeps the prices suppressed on these things?
There's some thoughts about that. If you take it back to the Ferrari dealership, it's probably a $10,000 item every 5 years. If you think about it, that's $2,000 a year for basic maintenance, and that's not cheap for most people. I get that, but if you take it to an independent, it might be a $5,000 or $6,000 bill, something like that. So I would go with the it's $1,000, maybe $1,200 a year for routine maintenance. Not bad.
Let's think about this just one more way, and then we can move on. It's at this price, it's cheaper than like a new Land Rover Range Rover Sport, right? Those are about $90,000. The rear seats are actually usable. I mean, they are pretty big. It's a V12 Ferrari. It's probably not going to depreciate anymore. I mean, this is like kind of crazy value that you could really use on a regular basis. I don't know how much you drive yours, but how long have you had it? What have you learned about it?
Well, I've had it for, let's call it 5 years now. I paid in the mid-80s for it. It was, I've probably put, 1,700 miles on it since I got it. I had to pay a lot when I first picked the car up because the last owner never filled the fuel tank before, I guess. And when I filled it, bingo, I had a fuel leak. But other than that, it's been a really basically a very solid kind of, rock steady car. And when I need to take it out, there's no trauma. Just go,
Yeah.
and I leave it on a floater charger, and just take it out of the garage and drive it.
Yeah, the only thing that people might wanna know is, as you said, that most came with this automatic transmission, and really what it is a robotized manual. And now that's no big deal because they have these twin clutch systems where one gear is already engaged, and so it's just a really quick switch. There's no delay between shifts, but this car had a single clutch, but they had refined it to the point where this was probably the best of those single clutch systems. I don't know, is that kinda how you found it?
Yeah, I haven't had any problem. Well, actually, I will say the actuators on mine were a little twitchy, probably from sitting, and I replaced them. It was not cheap. I replaced them with good used units. They were $600 a piece,
Yikes.
so $1,200 for the total repair. It would have been 1,500 each had they been new, but it's been fine.
But it's
It's a
just kinda
used car.
smooth, it's not clunky like the first
Not
generation.
at all.
Yeah, it's really
Not at
good.
all. Not at all. Very smooth.
Alright, so
I
okay.
A lot of times I drive it just using the paddles instead of the automatic, just, and make the vroom vroom noises so that I feel like a race car driver. But hey, come on, you do it too, right?
Oh my god, I do it, like, on my way to bed at night, of course I do. I mean, well, thank you, for showing us. It's another great example of the bargains that still exist even though we're in a very strong market, and, as we've pointed out at the Hagerty or insider.hagerty.com, many times we are in a slightly static, kinda maybe cooling market just a little bit, but cars are still going for a lot of money, but there are bargains out there. But I mean, next week, Monterey Car Auctions. I mean, you're sort of the grand poobah because you've been going for so long. How long have you been going to this auction?
These auctions.
Oh, sorry. Yes, these
Yeah,
auctions.
the Grand Poobah. I like that. Yeah, I'm
It's
a
a
member of
theme.
the
It's
Grand
Big
Poobah
Papa,
Club.
Grand Poobah. I mean, it'll never.
All those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. Probably about for me, it's probably about 15 years, something like that. I've been
Okay.
going. For a long time, I didn't go. It is expensive. It is a big deal. The first time you go, it's full of mystery, and then after a while, it's kind of what you're just doing. But it is our Super Bowl. Let's just put it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
there used to be competitors. There would be, we'd say Scottsdale might be the same, but Scottsdale has faded a little bit. It's still huge. Don't get me wrong. So it's our Super Bowl in the old car world, and that's what we deal with.
So, as an appraiser, you're the publisher of the Hagerty Price Guide, and even though how many cars sell, it's maybe 400 cars over the week, right? So it's not like a huge number of the total market that's sold, but a lot of the perceptions about the market are baked during this week, and a lot of discussions to people who establish the values like you that you have with other people like you there, right? Like that's kind of why it's a very influential time. No?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the deals that get made that aren't on the floor of an auction. I mean, people looking at other people's collections, and keep in mind, as we all know, most sales in the classic car world do not happen at auction. It's a very small percentage that actually do. So people get together, they go out to dinner, they go out for drinks, they go on driving tours. There's all kinds of things that happen out there. All there's Porsche specific events, there's Bentley specific events. No matter what it is, most of the manufacturers have some sort of ride and drive for clients out there. It's a pretty nice place to be in August. It makes it very expensive to be there,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty nice place.
But this gives you the temperature of buyers and sellers that sort of sets the tone for at least the next 6 months as you're constantly updating our value guide. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And by the way, I'm going to correct you. It's a lot more than 400 cars that will be
Oh,
sold out there. There's a lot more than that offered, and there's a lot more to sell. I dare say that Meekums sell 400 cars just on their own
okay. Whoops.
in the 3 days that they have sale. Most of the sales are 1 and 2 day, but Bottoms is out there.
Yeah.
Broad Arrow has just got the catalogs last week. I think I have 32 pounds of catalogs, and I'm going to be
The
not
printed
taking
catalogs.
with
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean printed catalogs, not taking them all with me, but having them for reference when I come back here. Um, there's probably going to be a world record sale times 10,
Hmm.
in a number of different categories. And so it's the place to see and to see and be seen. I
Yeah.
mean, and it all ends on Sunday, a week from Sunday for when we're broadcast or when we're recording now. But Sunday at Pebble Beach, all the magic comes together. People on the ground. walking through Pebble, looking at things, and then it disappears again for another year. It's very cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of beating this because you know, this is such a small slice of the market, right? And the vast
Yeah.
majority of the cars we cover will never cross an auction block at Pebble. But the reason, as it's important, is it does. It's a reflection of what's going on. And one of the things I've seen over time, and I'm talking to you that I've been at Hagerty for the past 8 years, is that when everybody's optimistic, it's like this self-fulfilling cycle. That means the best cars come for sale for auction because the sellers think they might get the most money. And then that attracts more buyers with more money, and up we go. And I feel like this year we're at a start of that again because of this car that you've uh, highlighted that's going to be for sale, this Ferrari 412P, which is just an amazing car. And I think this is a pretty important thing that's happening next week. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. The 412P is going to be at Bonham's, which will be Bonham's signature car, probably their signature car for the entire year worldwide, as far as that goes. Um, a really interesting history. It doesn't have like the best ever race history, but the car is so painfully beautiful. I mean, it is kind of the last of the era when, designers designed cars before just engineers got involved and it was all about 100% aerodynamics.
Yeah.
And so this car is very significant to me, and I think it's going to tilt the scale. It's somewhere around $30 million,
Well,
Larry.
let me set it up a little bit. This is a 1967 Ferrari 412P. This was past the era when cars were built for street and track. It was just a race car. But, as you mentioned, these were sort of the lineage of the rear engine or mid engine Ferraris. This was the car that competed against the GT40 in the Ford versus Ferrari. Also in 1967, I think that was an important year because not this particular car didn't win races, but this model actually brought Ferrari a lot of success. And, as you said, it is achingly beautiful. And they don't, I think 4 or 5 of these exist in total, and they never come up for sale at auction. So that's why it's such a big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the ownership history on this car is just incredible. It has been, one of those cars that's been kind of cherished since new, which is very unusual for race cars. It,
Yeah.
it didn't, it did spend a lot of its life, in a corner somewhere in the back of a shop, where people were picking parts off of it and all that sort of stuff. So I think, all that stuff is very good news for this car, and I'm just dying to see what it goes for.
So you've seen this car, you've known it. Did it really sell for $10,000 at one point?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
keep in mind there was a time in the late '60s and into the early '70s where there was no such thing as vintage racing. So this was just a used up old race car. And so what do you do with a used up old race car? I mean, in NASCAR we hang them on our walls, right?
Yeah.
Put them on the ceiling and put them in museums and all that sort of stuff. But at some point, these cars were quite neglected because of the value of them. I mean, what do you do when you need to do a $10,000 rebuild, which is probably what it would cost for an engine rebuild back then on a $10,000 car? Not a happy situation.
Yeah, so we have an article on insider.hagerty.com that lists the 30 most expensive cars ever sold at auction. And there is not a P car, is what they call, on that list. The cheapest car that on that list of 30 is around, I want to say, 15 million. Do you have a
hmm
sense? I mean, it's hard to make a guess where this might end up, but what's your gut and experience tell you, Dave?
I'm going with my 30. I
30
think this
million,
car is, maybe either side of it, 28 to 32, something like that.
right?
Um, I've heard a lot of people talking about a higher figure up to 40.
Sure.
I kind of doubt it, but I would not be shocked if that happens.
Yeah, I think in terms of the automotive world, this is certainly like a Picasso. And as you pointed out, the only thing it's missing to bring it into the upper echelon, like if it had won Le Mans with Mario Andretti behind the wheel, then it's in the realm of the top five, right? That's the only
Oh
thing this
yeah,
car's missing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to the beauty of this car that we have to always keep in mind. And sorry, but even in race cars, pretty sells, and this car's got pretty all over it. So I like that.
Yeah, definitely go to insider.hagerty.com. Take a look at it, look at the photos. It will you will see what we were talking about. I mean, I can't wait to see it live because these cars are typically way smaller when you're standing next to them than they look in the photos. Okay, so we'll be watching that one, and you can always check back next week. We'll have running commentary going, and we'll certainly have it on the Hagerty socials. So, but there's a ton of other cars for sale next week. Dave, what is on your list that you're going to be watching?
Well, we don't talk about the old timers too much, but
What do you mean? We're talking to you all the time, Dave. What do you mean?
oh, very funny. Who writes your material? I love it. Hey, a 21 Stutz Series K Bearcat. So this is a Stutz Bearcat. A lot of people would argue that this is the original sports car. I would be in that argument with you.
You guys go crazy for these Stutzes, and I just don't see it. They look like any other Ford Model A out there. And I
I think
know I'm
that's
just some dumb idiot hick, but I mean, come on. Tell me why. Why are these sports cars?
dumb and idiot I'll go with, but hick, I mean, seriously, I don't think so. But no, just kidding. Really, you have to drive it to understand. I mean,
Okay.
and you also have to put yourself in the realm of 1921. America is not on wheels yet. It's just getting on wheels, courtesy of the Ford Motor Company, and this is a
Excellent.
Playboy sports car. This is a pardon me, an elegant rich guy's car. And unfortunately, to our eyes, to a lot of us, it looks like just another old car. But this was the pinnacle of engineering, the pinnacle of what you could do, with automobiles at its time. This car is estimated. It's, by the way, barn find.
Yeah, this is the
It's
one Carini
estimated,
found, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
350 to $500,000. Yeah, it's a Carini car, so I mean, it's got to be worth more, right?
Yeah, we know somebody in LA that has one of these, and I was trying to get Aaron Robinson behind the wheel, but the magneto failed because I'd really like somebody to explain what these are like. And you're right, it has to be compared in period to what else was existing out there. But the people who know, like you, really value these cars and are really taken by them. Like I've heard they're the McLaren F1 of the 20s, and that's sort of what makes them interesting. Even though, like, I mean, I guess you can keep these things running. They're just oddballs, I think, to the next generation in a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that, but I think you're spot on with the McLaren F1 comparison. I
Oh,
think that
really?
that's
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. It is it was hard to get one new. The Stutz Bearcat name. When you say Stutz, Bearcat just rolls off after that because that was like their pinnacle car, just like McLaren F1.
Yeah,
It kind of goes without saying that when you say the best McLaren ever, the answer is going to be F1. The
sure.
best Stutz ever, most people, the answer would be the Bearcat. So, well, we'll see. I mean, this is not a lot of money for what we're talking about. Not even $1 million. That's bargain time. 350 to 500K. I think it'll do every bit of 500 personally, but we'll see.
So it's just one of those cars, Dave, in the realm of collecting. You hear this in that world. It sounds kind of pretentious, but I think it ends up being important. It's like, to have the right cars to make the right collection. Now, I kind of cringe when I say that, but I think what you're saying is when you own a car like this, it signifies to anybody else in the know that this person really, you're going to have to stomp on me if I say this wrong, Dave, but values the right things in the car world.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you were going to tell the story of the sports car, you'd want to have one here. I mean, obviously, we get into the 30s, and you have all kinds of choices with Asada Frashini and all that sort of
Yeah, the
stuff.
Alfa
I mean, but
Romeos, sure.
exactly, and you're sure an Alfa Romeo, and when you get into the 50s, you're probably going to wind up with a 300 SL Roadster, all that sort of stuff. So, if you were to build a tier of collector cars and started with the first of the sports cars, this would be one of your very few choices.
And I do love the thing that it's out of Indianapolis. This car especially, because I love that it's this barn find and it does have this beautiful patina and it has all the original labels and the marking. If you go to the Gooding website, you can see a lot of this stuff. There's a little oil can in the engine bay, and it's just sort of this relic's the wrong word. I guess artifact's the right word. And
Time warp.
time
Yeah,
warp.
exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
super cool. Yeah, what a bargain to have something like this in somebody's collection. I agree. So you think this is a $700,000-800,000 car? Where do you think it'll end up?
Well, It's always a bit of a crapshoot when you got a barn find,
Oh,
because not everybody appreciates the barn finds for what they are, and a lot of people go crazy over barn finds, and they just want them like this because they said this is as original as you're going to find. So we're going to see who's going to win out at at the Gooding sale on this one, but I'm looking forward to
I
seeing it.
feel like the current zeitgeist is for more appreciation for a barn find than perfectly restored.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So this one should go pretty strong. Yeah.
I hope it does. We will see.
And then we're going to switch gears 180 degrees because the next one on the list is a Porsche 918 Spider that's for sale at the Broad Arrow auctions. They're not calling it the Radius auction. That's on Thursday night. This should be pretty exciting. You know, these cars are super interesting in that you probably remember how hard they were for Porsche to sell. Did you ever hear those stories when they were new in 2015?
I remember them well, and I can even remember being at a Porsche dealer in Nevada in 2015, where they were taking one of these apart for some unknown problem. And there were like three of them there. A volume dealer, I get it, but you had your choice of a silver one, a black one, and a white one from memory. And it was like, what's the deal with these? And it's like, oh, if you want one, you can have it. It was a lot of money then, but and that happens all the time in the world of collector cars. The ones that everybody says, nope, just give me a 911, I'll be fine. Now there's a lot more appreciation for them. So much so that this car is estimated between 1,850,000 and $2,100,000.
Yeah, I think we some of those buyers missed the mark 10 years ago when these came out. They were amazing. I mean, it used the V8 was a race version of the that they had in the Spider, and it was sounded like a Formula One motor. These were crazy
Hmm.
fast, easy to drive. We may have talked about these before. I was at a press event and I was following Pat Long in a 911 Turbo. It was so easy to keep up with him. I had to pull him aside and say, "Hey, man, you don't have to go so slow. You just hit it." He's like, "Oh no, I was." I mean, these cars are incredibly fast and powerful and all that stuff. They are a little weird because they do roll around and they're hybrids. So they roll around in some instances in electric only mode. And then when that gas engine fires, it's kind of terrifying because it's so loud. And then when it runs, it's like, "Rah!" And you're like, whoa, whoa, hey, we were just chatting over here. So there are some of that downside, but they're beautiful cars and all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting how they start to people start to appreciate him given some time, and maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time. Is perhaps what we're concluding on this one.
Yeah, I think so. And once again, I think it's going to be an interesting car to see. It's just one that I picked out because I know that we both like the 918
Yeah.
probably more than we should, and it's going to be good to see this thing hopefully go above $2 million.
Yeah, it's a great color. This is a great car, so I look forward to watching that for sure. Okay, the next one, also at Broad Arrow Auctions, is we're going to skip around a little bit. It's another Ferrari. It's a 1964. We've talked about these before. It's a version
Yeah,
of the 250 GT, which was like that was like Ferrari's baseline chassis and powertrain, and a V12 engine. They called it the 250. It was a ladder frame, but then sometimes other coach builders made different bodies. Correct?
yeah, that's right.
And
And this is a 250 GT Lusso.
yeah.
Lusso means luxury. And this one is just such an excellent presentation. Beautiful color, kind of a mid to dark green, just a gorgeous presentation. I've seen this car before. It's chassis 5695. All the way through. It's got the Ferrari Classic A. Uh, you know, the red book, I guess they call it, and all that stuff. It's been scrutinized and judged at concours around the world. Just really, really,
Has a full
yeah.
toolkit,
Oh
everything,
yeah.
even a wrench to take off the oil filter, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's well documented, and the knock against these cars were they weren't particularly fast,
Ah,
um, and it was kind of like, yeah, but who cares? I mean, they're just so good looking, and I know I've said that twice here, since we started talking, but in the typical Italian way. You know, in this particular case, anything you want with fast, you can get in another car because the Lusso isn't slow, don't get me wrong, but it is just a beautifully performing road car that anyone who drives it would never have any argument with how well this car comes together as a whole.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, this car is beautiful and it looks perfect. Like it just came out of a restoration. So this would you call this one a number one car or number two? It's gotta be
I'd have to, you know, get right down on it before
you could
I
say.
declare it a number one. There's so few number ones, but it's
Yeah.
darn close if it's not. So I'm still looking at pictures. I saw this car years ago, but you know, I would not be surprised if it's still or has been returned to number one
And to your
condition.
point about these cars put together and sort of they're all integrated, I've driven some of these and they are striking for how modern they feel. I mean, the steering's really heavy at low speeds, right? It's a V12 over the front wheels and there's no power steering. But once it gets moving, there's like an agility and a grace to these things. You've got that engine humming, tons of torque, beautiful little shifter. I mean, they're very, very usable cars for tours and stuff like that. So that's why I think there's some of these Ferraris from the 60s like this that are very expensive cars. Let's call it like it is, but that are about 2 million bucks that you get such high style, such lineage and craftsmanship, I find to be kind of bargains in the classic car world. Am I
You know,
crazy?
I'm gonna agree with everything you said there because you know, this is another one of those cars that you know you could put in your garage, you know, turn all the lights off except for maybe a spotlight, and sit there and look at it for hours.
Yeah.
It's just every single line is just about perfection. It's just a really really well done car.
And the Colombo V12, which of course was the backbone for Ferrari, would not exist without that motor, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. What's next on your list you're going to be watching next week?
How about when we go to Mecum, we can see a 63 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Roadster. Now, 63 is the ultimate year for these cars. Um, you know, they were probably built in 62 and just titled in 63. I won't get into all that. But the very, very last ones had some really interesting features. Number one, an aluminum or alloy block, which is preferred by most, but not all people. Some people prefer the iron block. Let's just be real specific. So, you know, apples and oranges to some people. Others, it's a, you know, Macintosh versus a Granny Smith. Um, and it also has four wheel disc brakes. And so, you know, it's the one you want. If you got all the money, you want a 63 300 SL in a roadster.
Okay. Can you clarify a couple things for Dum Dum over here?
Yeah,
Right.
no problem.
This car
Yeah,
really started with the 55 Gullwing Mercedes. Yeah.
54, but yeah.
54. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's the car, the Mercedes sports car that was a really interesting because it was a tube frame. It had that canted over straight six engine. And most people will say was one of the preeminent usable sports cars of its era. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then as that car matured and was refined, this last of the line lost the gull wing doors, which really were a pain to get in and out of for this really fetching roadster with some modern updates. Am I still working all right here?
Well, actually, there are very, very few things that are similar with the Roadster. You know, there are very few things that are interchangeable Roadster to Gullwing.
Oh,
The car went through a revolution, not just an evolution,
hmm,
in 1958, which was, I think, the only year when they were building both the Roadsters and the Gullwings. So the coupes and the Roadsters only had a little bit of crossover. And Mercedes saw this as the future of this production car, not a race car, a production car.
I see.
So very limited number of cars built over the time. But in the very, very end, most people would argue they built the most drivable version of this 300 SL.
I see. Okay.
Um, and you know, there'll always be arguments between the SL Roadster and the SL Coupe, also known as the Gullwing,
Yeah.
which was never called the Gullwing by the factory. It's just a name that it picked up. Now, of course, the factory will, I mean, you know, the people use it as shorthand and it's completely acceptable. But this is, like I said, this is the ultimate year for the 300 SL
Dave,
Roadster.
I'm imagining you at a car show being the nerd car car person correcting everybody that says, "Hey, look at that gull wing over there." And Dave comes up, "Well, no, it was never called the gull wing." And that's you, isn't it? You're that guy. I could totally
Yeah, no,
picture that.
I am totally not that guy. I'll refer to a '63 Corvette as a split window, even though General Motors never called it a split window. Cars adopt names over
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and it happens to a lot of cars. And this is what happened with the 300 SL Coupe.
So
So,
you've picked a couple of picks here that are kind of interesting in that same era, the Lusso and this Mercedes, right? They're about the
mhm.
same money, right? You've got V12 Ferrari versus V12 Ferrari Emotion versus what a lot of things you pointed out. You were saying this Mercedes is different in that it's really a very technologically solid car, right? Well engineered, maybe, but it's also really pretty too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's a gorgeous
it's
car.
very, very pretty. It's going to be interesting to to see what happens with this. I know at least one person I think is on this car is going to buy or is looking to buy a car,
Yeah,
and I'm thinking that it would be a good choice for him. He wants a car to tour,
yeah.
and so if that's the case, I wouldn't be surprised if my buddy winds up with this. So it's going to be interesting for me to watch. But here's the thing all the last three cars, the 918 Spider, the 250 Lusso,
Yeah.
and the 300 SL, are all in right about that same, maybe as little as under 2 million, but 2 million, 2,000,003, 2,000,004. They're all in the same price range so far.
They're
How
like
about that?
Camrys. I mean, there's $2 million cars everywhere.
Yeah, just like Camrys. More like Priuses, actually, because I mean, the
Yeah.
918 has more in common with the Prius than the other two, but that we won't go there.
Yeah, but, it's part of the fun of going to the Monterey auctions because all these things are out for viewing, and typically you can buy a ticket to get into these auctions to view for 20 bucks, right?
Yeah,
And all
yeah,
the
a lot of
cars.
them, Mecum especially, kind of
Yeah,
a walk up and get it.
yeah.
Yeah, and, I mean, you can have so much fun for so little money, and Mecum goes on 3 days. So what, for $60, you can, hang out with car guys, hang out with auction, hang out with, the cars themselves. I
And
mean, everything's expensive in Monterey. Let's not be, let's not kid ourselves, but, this might be the best bargain going is going to a Broad Arrow, a Gooding, whatever sale, or a Mecum sale, and just walking around.
well,
It's
the other
fun.
thing that's about these auction houses, knowing the people at Broad Arrow, the 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 length of time and the work that goes into presenting the history of not just the model, but that particular car. It's super detailed, super fun. You can really dive really deep through these auction catalogs if that's what you want to do. And some of them are produced in a much higher quality than others, but there's a lot of great information in there too, which is kind of fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. You could spend weeks and weeks and weeks reading through them.
Yeah.
So,
So let's take a stroll to maybe a little less rarefied air. And let's look at this other kind of pre-war car that you're. I don't know. Are you interested in this one or what is it? This LaSalle. Tell us. Well, first explain to everybody what a LaSalle is, and then maybe this particular car, why you're interested in it.
all right. Well, LaSalle was kind of introduced as the baby Cadillac, the less expensive Cadillac, and you know how often that has worked well with General Motors to screw around with the Cadillac brand.
Right.
The answer to that is it never works. But LaSalle didn't last a long, long time, but they made some really interesting cars and some really beautiful cars. Now, I pointed this car out because this car is owned by Don, or was owned by the late Don Williams.
Hmm.
Don was the collector's collector. I'm just going to give him a shout out. I know his son now works for Mecum, and I know some of the members of the family. When I was just starting out in this business in basically the 1990s, when I had a question, I knew I could always call Don Williams, and he would always answer the phone, and he would always answer the question or point me to somebody who would. And that's what I call a real gentleman. And I will never, ever forget that because I'm just some schlub.
Yeah,
He,
yeah.
might have met me. I mean, I know we met each other. You might have remembered me, you might have not, but he always had 10 minutes to spend on the
Oh, that's
phone with me.
sweet.
Yeah, just really a class act. I mean, just all the way through. Well, this is one of his cars, and this is not in the $1 million range. This is our first car in the maybe the popular price range. This one's
Popular
estimated
price range is over 100 grand.
well, yeah, in Monterey, yeah, that's lunch and dinner. This one's an AACA National First, which is a big deal. It's a Series 52 convertible coupe. and this one's estimated between 125 and $150,000.
Now,
A lot of cars.
this I want to go back to that time when you were calling Don Williams because people seem to forget. Now you and Hagerty produce this price guide that I remember when McKeel told me why he started it was because there was just no feeling of safety or certainty in what a car was worth. So everybody felt like they were getting ripped off, and he thought if there was a little more data and certitude, it would help more people enjoy the hobby. And I think he's been totally right about that. But back in the '90s, like, I mean, what did you do? How did you value these things? I guess that's what you were trying to figure out by calling Don, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, especially with pre-war cars, which have always been a problem for me, always been a problem for a lot of people. But
Yeah,
he would explain when you call and talk to Don, he would explain where the car fit in, which was such a big help.
I
So,
see.
you might be talking about some oddball car, and he would say, "Listen, it's a misfit." That sort of thing, but it's still cool because people like them, that sort, and he would always just make sense of kind of this nonsense stuff. Well, now we do have a lot more information, and of course, it probably, since let's just call it 1995 to 2023, what hundreds and millions and actually billions and billions of words have been written about the old car hobby, the
Yeah,
business around
sure.
old cars and all that sort of stuff. But when you picked up the phone, when you talked to Don Williams, you knew you were talking to the source. You knew you were talking to one
No.
of the greats. And we stand on the shoulders of people who schooled us in what we should do. And Don Williams has some of the biggest shoulders of anybody I've ever known.
Dave, damn it. You know what you just did? You're going to make me say something I don't want to say, but I feel the same way and I hope the audience feels that way that they're getting to talk to you. Like this wealth of knowledge and experience, and I've seen it all because I never stump you. And believe me, my goal every show is to make you look dumb, and it's impossible. So,
No, no, no,
kudos to
no,
you.
no.
And
Actually, yeah, Larry, you've never met my wife. She'll be out in Pebble Beach. She can show you all the ways that I'm dumb.
Okay,
I
okay.
swear to you.
All right, back to this LaSalle. It's fascinating to me. It's a 1940. The what I love most about it is the font on the Speedo and the certain things. It just has that period look that is just it's so cool. It's like, why aren't we using this font anymore? I mean, it's really, really cool. Just stuff like that that I find so just really captivating about something like this. It's interesting that there's a market for a car like this in the six figures, I guess, is where I'm struck. You know what I mean? Still a valuable car.
Yeah, well, as it should be. I mean, it's actually when you think about it, it is baseline fun. It's not a complicated car. Almost anybody could keep this car running who had, basic knowledge.
Mm.
It's not going to be like that Ferrari. It's not going to cost you, 3, 4, 5 grand a month or a year or every few years. If you park it, turn the battery off, it's going to be just fine when you start it, 3 months later. So, it's got a lot of that going for it. It's a 3-speed manual transmission. Color on this car, I love it. It's Homer gray, which is, how can you not think of The Simpsons, right? With the interior color of red.
Yeah.
And, it's convertible. So it's got
It's
built-in
elegant.
fun.
It's very elegant. Yeah, it has an
It is. I
elegance
mean,
to it.
this is one that you could put the golf clubs in the back and
Yeah.
go to the country club, or you could put the top up and go to a show somewhere. I mean, it's just, when you arrive in this, you have arrived. How's
So,
that?
I mean, it is what an interesting swath of automobiles in one place, across, the Monterey Peninsula next week. We've gone from, hyper expensive race cars to supercars and hypercars. Now we're at this, really World War II era fake Cadillac. Oh, that's wrong. I shouldn't have said that. But you know what I mean?
Please,
Yeah.
the Cadillac for every man.
And now
Okay, how's that?
there's another car here that is also going to be at Broad Arrow auction, which I can't wait to see. It's a week from it's next Thursday. That would
Yeah,
be the 17th, and it's at the airport there out in Monterey. And this is a 1963. I'm going to butcher this Citroen Deux Chevaux 4x4 Sahara. This is really funny car. Tell the audience about it, please.
Okay, so the Duchevaux was to France what the Volkswagen Beetle was to Germany in a lot of ways, or the Topolino was to Italy. It
Which
was
is
a
what?
very affordable. Pardon me.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, a very affordable, very basic transportation car. The story about the Duchevaux was that it was supposed to hold four passengers, but you should also be able to drive over a farm field with a basket of eggs in the seat and not have the basket of eggs break. So that was the engineer's, design, calling, I guess, to
Wow.
get this car done. Now, these cars were, everywhere in Europe up until the mid 1960s. But they didn't make many of this Sahara because it is a 4 by 4. So, how did they make a four wheel drive? Why, the easy way, of course. They put two motors in, one in the front
Get
and
out.
one in the back. Yes, this has two drive motors, two Duchevaux motors. There are only about 700 of these made between 1958 and 71. They're 425cc air cooled engines. And I mean, before the days of computers, you don't have a computer controlling it. You're controlling both engines. How's that?
It's super cool. I mean, this is one of the things that's so fun about these auctions is like this stuff comes out, and I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about the car world, and I had no idea such a thing existed from the factory, a twin engine car. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, I know it really is, and it's really fun too. Somehow probably more fun to have than to drive. As far
Yeah.
as that goes. But a four wheel drive Citroen Duchevaux. Duchevaux means two horses.
And that if people, I mean, this always used to confuse me. This is how dumb I am, Dave. You actually see it. The two CV
Right.
is how it's written, but you say it in French as deux chevaux, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. It took me a while to figure that out. I'm just hoping I'm short circuiting that for the audience.
And these were made. The Sahara was made
Mhm.
for the desert of France's North American
Okay.
North Africa.
You know where my head goes when I see this thing? You know, it's gray. It's got the spare tire on the hood. Do you remember that movie Spaceballs?
Yeah.
And you know when I think they called him Dark Helmet, the Darth Vader
Right.
character with the big
Yeah.
helmet.
Exactly.
He's on the
Yeah.
planet Tatooine or whatever, the desert planet, and he's looks like he's driving around. This is what I picture him driving: is this Duchevaux 4x4? I don't know why.
As well he should. As well he
Yes, well,
should.
he should. Yeah, but this is one of those oddballs that's going to fetch a lot of money because of its rarity, because of its novelty, and this one looks to be in really great kind of original condition.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been restored. Apparently, at a cost of over 51,000 Swiss francs, which I happen to know is just around 51,000 American dollars too. But it's actually a little bit more. But anyhow, I think this is a great opportunity to have a very, very rare car built for the North African Sahara. And what could be better than having when your first engine craps out, you just start using the second engine, right?
I'll be there that Thursday night, I think, and I'll be watching and see the excitement that comes on, and it's part of the fun, watching these sitting in the auction. The one thing that the first like live auction I went to, Dave, and it was some Mercedes that I can't remember. It sold for several $1,000,000, and the thing that struck me was like it was like the room was still quiet. Like, nobody got up and high-fived each other. Nobody was like, "Yes, I wanted that car for 20 years." I mean, they're really kind of funny affairs, and I find them just really, interesting to be around, I guess is my point. I mean, you've seen it so much, you're sort of maybe, used to it, but they're just entertainment on their own.
No, the funny thing is you're right. I've seen it a lot, but I never get used to it because I think
Oh,
it's
okay.
always fun. It's auction theater. I've said that so many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
It's like going to the theater. You're seeing something different all the time. The mood changes per car. It's like going to the dog park. You're at the dog park and all the dogs are happy, and then all of a sudden a new dog comes in, and then everybody goes crazy. It's the same thing in a collector car auction. It's fun. The new car comes in, people go crazy. Some people sit on their hands and don't do anything. Some people get very excited, but it's a great exercise in watching human nature in action.
So,
And this, by the way, is between $80,000 and $100,000
yeah,
estimate.
it's a cool
So we
car.
can afford this. You want to split it?
No, I wish I could. I mean, I'm going to be selling my Fox Body Mustang and hoping I get 15 grand for it someday. So, no, this car's out of
Well,
my
you can
range.
get the down on this, right? You can stroke the down on this with that, right?
Yeah, I borrowed for a classic car once. I'll never do that again. That was terrifying. Um, let's move on to the last one, the oddity, the sort of like the car that is drawn out for Monterey in the hope that somebody or at least three people will see it and start some sort of bidding war. And I don't know, the there's this I've read this myth, and sometimes it's true about the hidden Ferrari somewhere. Do you remember there was some story I read somewhere where somebody borrowed or buried a racing Ferrari in wood chips?
Yeah.
Does that ever ring a bell? Was that true?
Well, there was a Dino that was buried in
A backyard. Yeah.
a backyard. So sure, I mean these things do happen. This is part of the car we're talking about is a '54 Ferrari 500 Mondial series. I'm sorry, pardon me, that's a mouthful. Spider Series One, Pininfarina, 2 words back then, um, and it's from the Lost and Found collection at RM. If you see a photo of this car, and hopefully you will, it is basically on a couple of rolling carts. It looks like the car that fell off the side of a cliff in a Hollywood movie
Oh,
in
that's a good way to say it.
1955
Yeah, totally. And then was left to rust.
and kept on rolling, caught on fire,
Yeah.
and kept on rolling, and then went sat out for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. It is absolutely distinguishable as a car, but you can't look at it and say what kind of car it is. It's just absolutely a rolled over, tossed around, world's most challenging restoration. And what will this car go for? What is the estimate? 1.2 to 1.6 million dollars.
I mean, it's really, I mean, it's basically, like you said, it's a pile of bent metal. And that
Yeah,
metal has, it's like had the hands of Jesus on it, basically. It doesn't even have the original engine, but it reportedly has the original gearbox. I mean, there are no suspension on it. I mean, it is just a shell of a shell. And, there's rust. You could see it. It's, you know, on one hand, you could say who would pay, this isn't even worth this is worth its scrap value, but it's Ferrari metal, so we know it's worth more than that. On the other hand, that car itself, like nobody built there weren't that many of them. The 500 Mondial Spider series, right?
yeah, there were 13 originally done with Pininfarina Spider coachwork.
Right.
Very, very rare. Well, any 54 Ferrari is rare.
Yeah, it
The
was early.
company was just ramping up at this time. This did have a racing appearance at Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, and the Emilia Grand Prix. So it is a race car. It has been driven. It was owned by it was raced by a Ferrari team driver. And so, it's got tons and tons of history. I believe the auction catalog says it best when it says it is an intriguing restoration project.
Okay, this is where you got to guide us a little bit here, Dave, because what is if this car was, had been restored, it had the original engine. I mean, there are others. What is that worth ballpark?
Depending on how good it's done, what engine it has, and
Sure.
everything else. Let's call it 15 to 20 million when it's
Holy
done.
smokes. So a
Possibly.
significant amount of money. Now,
No, I don't think it would be any less than 8. So if you put it that way, you got like $4 million you can spend on a restoration. You can get an awful lot done for $4 million still.
okay,
Even with
but this
inflation, it's
this
still a
is
lot.
where the capriciousness of that high-end classic car market is really interesting. And it's all going to be about if there's like a handful of Ferrari people. I'm saying like let's say Dave, you and I buy this thing, right? We ship it to the
Yeah.
preeminent we ship it to the Ferrari factory. and we
Hmm.
pay them to restore it because they do that now, and they charge us, yeah, right, every bit of $5 million, and we get our car back. It doesn't have the original engine, but a lot of race cars don't have the original engines, but we have the serial number, we have the provenance, all that stuff. Now, if the right 5 people in that world approve of this and say, "Yep, this is a legit car," we're gold. If, however, they go, "Yeah, you know what? There just wasn't enough of the original car left. This is really a recreation. It's not the original." We're screwed. We're sunk. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but this tests the whole theory that everybody says that if you wreck your Ferrari 250
Yeah.
GTO,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a let's just shorthand it and call it a $50 million car, and it costs you $10 million to put it back together. Is it still a $50 million car? The chances are the answer is yes.
Oh.
Um, Even if you had to graft in some more metal and everything else.
So if we
So
had the money, you'd pay the 2 million for this and sink in another 5 to restore it?
You know, Larry, I'm in my 60s, and I don't
So?
see this car getting done in the next decade,
Really?
unless it was by some. Well, I mean, you have parts you have to source, you
Oh,
have all kinds of. It does have a title, which is good news,
that's okay.
but I mean, even if you put a team of craftsmen at Ferrari, which by the way, double that 4 million at Ferrari,
Is that
it's
right?
8 million or 10 million. Sure, I mean they're the factory; they can charge it. So anyhow, and you put the $10 million into making the car right, which seems like a hellacious amount of money when you realize you can build a complete office building for that kind of money, and all other kinds of things. But if you put the Ferrari craftsman on it and they took their time and everything else, I don't think you can get this done in 4 or 5 years. It would take longer than that just to do. You got to start with the research. You got to figure out absolutely everything is where it's supposed to be. If you do a sloppy job on it, then the car's never going to be worth that kind of money. But if you do a perfect quote unquote restoration, then you could wind up with a moneymaker at this car.
Okay, let's talk about these restoration prices. That is obscene. $10 million? Okay, at $100 an hour, that is what did I say? That's 100,000 hours, man hours, which is 2,500 weeks of work. Let's see, divided by 365, that's 7 years of one person toiling continually, day in and day out. I mean, there's
Now,
no way it costs that much.
well, you're not counting the research, number one. You're not counting the parts, which are going to be phenomenally expensive, not to the order of $1 million. I get that, but the other thing is, who works for $100 an hour? Who's a craftsman who works at Ferrari? I mean, I'm sure they don't pay their guys $100 an hour, but I'm sure as hell they bill them over that. They're talking about an international clientele, some of which have unlimited amounts of money. So take that $100, double it, and then double it again, and you're talking $300-400 an hour.
So,
That's one thing.
okay,
Uh,
looking at the photos, like some of this metal is so crinkled, there's no saving it, the sheet metal.
right.
And it would be really fun to be in the room with those craftsmen as they try and figure out what they can save and what they can't. And it may somebody may conclude that, I mean, I guess I don't. I guess and there's no easy answer for this. Is this thing just an artifact as it sits, or is it a starting project? Is it a starting base for a bigger project? What's your hunch on that?
If I had a collection of 75 Ferraris, and there's a lot of people out there who have such collections as a collection of 75
Uh huh.
Ferraris, and I was building a new purpose-built building for it, probably for that $4 million, and I wanted to have something on display when you enter, this would be the perfect car to leave just as it is
Oh,
and leave it on display.
yeah. That is a thing for those lucky people, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The drama
Yeah.
of the entrance to their personal museum. I mean, as crazy that may sounds. I mean, I don't want to incite a riot, but there are collectors out there with facilities like that, right?
Oh, yeah, there are.
Yeah.
I've been to some of them, and there definitely are.
Okay.
But I mean, so this might be the starting point, that somebody says, this is a Ferrari race car. This is how I found it. It's an artifact, and I like it this way.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to that we were talking about before. There was that Bugatti that they hauled out of a lake, and
Yep.
that did not get restored and sold for almost $400,000. And this was in 2018. So a long time ago, and the car was not as, and Bugatti's a pretty big provenance car, but not on the level of Ferrari, correct?
Well, yeah, and that car was driven into the lake or put in the lake because of a overdue tax bill. I don't know if you knew that story, but guy owed taxes on it. The best way to not pay the taxes is to say, "Hey, go find the car. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't know what you're talking about." So, but yeah, this car has led a very, very rough life. The other way you could do it would be to take all the 3D photos of it, have it as a holographic display alongside the restored car. Think about that. How fun would that be to show what this car was before and what your craftsman or the craftsman did with putting this car back together.
Oh
If
my
you have
gosh.
enough money, you can put anything back together.
God, you are a visionary. I had not thought about that. That's really brilliant. Well, Dave, thank you for all the background for Monterey. There's a lot of the stuff you can watch. Please keep visiting insider.hagerty.com, and we'll have a lot of news as it happens. We'll have a lot of analysis, and then the week after, we will be digesting everything that happens and what does it mean. So I'm really looking forward to that. Dave, are there any final words that you'd like to mention to the audience?
Yeah, I would say that if you have the chance to get anywhere near Monterey, you can do it for free. I mean, if you have buddies who live in Salinas or something like that, you can drive down. You're not going to get into all the events, but keep in mind that the cars on the street in Monterey, in Pebble Beach, in all the surrounding areas, it's a car show in and of itself. You can literally go to the
Yeah.
In-N-Out Burger and spend 45 minutes there looking at some of the best cars in the world. There's tours out there that people drive on, and you can get in line for where the tour is, and you can go there for free and visit. So you don't have to have the $5,000 you might spend on all the admission prices on all the high end events. You can go and you can have fun. All the clubs, or a lot of the clubs, have something, so there's something going on.
Oh, the car clubs, you
24
mean?
hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of free stuff. There's Exotics on Cannery Row, right in the middle of Monterey, which is all the exotic cars. And so to your point, just the car watching in general is pretty spectacular. So that, I mean, it is on the bucket list for a lot of people to go see, and definitely for good reason. So,
Hey, wait a minute. We're forgetting our favorite Saturday morning, the Concours de Lemons.
oh my gosh, that's true. And it's totally free, isn't it?
It's totally free.
Right. So that's Hagerty's Concours de Lemons. We'll be there. It's I can't remember the name of the park there in near Monterey where it's hosted. Do you know it?
I don't remember the name of the park, but I know it's in the shadow of the Doubletree Hotel. So if you find the Doubletree, which is the largest building in all of Monterey, then you can be able to find it. It's within walking distance of there.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please give us a positive review in Apple iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps more people find this. We certainly enjoy producing it for you. And leave your questions in the comments. You can do it in the article that we post this podcast on Hagerty.com, or you can certainly do it on our YouTube channel. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next week on Hagerty's No Reserve.
Bye-bye.